Redditors who have nearly been murdered but talked your way out of it. What did you say to your would-be killer that saved your life? Story 1. I was babysitting for my cousins, aged 5 and 3. I was 14 at the time, and the 5-year-old found his dad's handgun and was waving it around like a toy. He was pointing at things and pretending to shoot them, not putting his finger on the trigger thankfully, and at one point he pointed it at me and pretended to be a bank robber. I told him if he handed me the gun he could go get the package of Oreos on the counter and we could have some. It actually worked, and I stuck the gun on a high shelf until my aunt and uncle came home. As it turned out, the gun was loaded. My aunt made my uncle buy a gun safe and put all the guns in the garage after that. Story 2. My brother was attacked in our house by a guy with a knife. My brother didn't know the guy had a knife when he put the guy in a headlock. When he whistled for dad, the guy dropped the knife and covered his ear. By the way, my brother can whistle at about 120 decibels, louder if he's angry. So my brother pulled the guy's hand off his ear, put his mouth down to the guy's ear, and just whistled as loudly as he could 4 or 5 times. When dad got to them and threw the guy out the door, the guy couldn't even stand up straight as his equilibrium had been thrown completely off. He's probably still deaf. Story 3. I'm 19, first time in Europe. Started in Italy visiting relatives, and the first night I went out for a walk. Group of guys looking like trouble pushed me around and then showed me their knives demanding money, which I seemed to obviously have since I stood out as a foreigner by my clothes. The problem was, all I had on me was $20 and a rubber because I was so naive from hearing how easy it was to get laid. I was expecting local girls to just see me and approach me to sleep with me, so I explained to these guys in broken 1960s Italian, gleaned from my parents. They laughed their butts off and wished me luck. Story 4. I was accosted by a young kid with a gun. He couldn't have been more than 13. I can't remember the exact conversation, but basically the kid looked at me and said, "Give me anything you have and I'll let you go." I wanted to freak out, but something in me said to remain calm. I said something like, "Is that a real gun or an airsoft?" And he pulled out the clip. Sure enough, it was real, surprisingly. I said, "Look kid, I don't have anything but $5 and this crappy phone that isn't going to really get you anything. Is this really worth life in prison if you shoot me?" He looked at me, looked at the gun, looked at me, started crying, and turned around and walked away. I did call the police and alert them that there was a kid walking around 14th Street brandishing a firearm, but by the time they got to where I was, the kid was long gone. I pointed the cops in the direction he went and what he looked like and all that stuff, but I'm not sure whatever came out of it. Story 5. I talked my way out of getting stabbed when I was being robbed. I don't know if he would have murdered me, but definitely would have messed me up. I just told him to chill and put the knife away and he could have whatever he wanted. So he put the knife away and went through my stuff while I just stood there annoyed. I went for breakfast with a girl right after and just carried on with my day. Story 6. I'm not entirely sure how close I was to being murdered. This took place back when I worked at the register at McDonald's. It was around 10. We weren't 24 hours and would be closing up soon, and in walks a guy that's drunk off his butt. He comes up to the counter and starts chatting with me about nothing in particular. Mostly nonsense I can't remember, but I started to get the impression he wasn't just drunk. I'm doing my best to just humor him, waiting for him to leave when out of nowhere he says, "If I was gonna kill everyone in here, I'd kill you first because you look like you know what to do." A bit of a morbid joke, I thought, and said, thanks. At this point, he pulled out a gun from his waistband and pointed it at me. It wasn't like a full-on point, more like limply holding it in my general direction. I didn't know what to do and only hoped to God he was still joking. He then said, "Bang," and tucked the gun back into his waistband. I think that he just wanted to let me know that he could kill me if he wanted to. He left shortly after that. I informed my manager and was later told that the man was both a regular and long-term friend of my manager, who tried to downplay what happened. I left that job shortly after for school. Story 7. It was my sister's 21st birthday, and the whole family and a couple of my sister's friends decide to all go out to a bar. So we go 3 cars deep to this small bar. Night starts off fine, everyone's dancing and drinking, then this group of 15 people come in, and as soon as they walk in, they start bumping into people. They're undressing girls with their eyes and are challenging guys to do something. I tell my girl we gotta watch out for these guys, so we stay clear of them until the end of the night. Me and my girl kept to ourselves, just watching everyone, and we see these guys surround my sister's friend. So I go and pull him away from the situation and asked what happened. He just complimented the guys on their hats because we're 49er fans. So those guys leave. We head out about 20 minutes later. I grab my sister and her 2 friends and we head to the car. As we're walking to the car, I see 3 guys from that group walk towards my car from the other side of the parking lot. I tell everyone to get in the car and my girl is forcing my sisters and her friends inside while I approach them. Me, "What's good?" Them, "What's up, homie? You guys got a problem?" Me, Nah, whatever happened inside, just leave it inside. It's my sister's birthday and we're not trying to have any stuff go down tonight. We good? I should have known something was about to go down. One of them was holding his shirt over his face, and the other had his hat down real low and was holding his waist. But the main guy looks at them and says, yeah, we're good. And I shake his hand and then the other guy's hand, but then this guy with his hat real low won't shake my hand and won't take his hand off his waist. So I say, your boy says we're cool. We don't want no problems. At this moment, my uncle and my best friend come around the corner and start yelling, yo, hey! And that's when it happened. All three guys pulled out their guns and started shooting in the air and then shot towards my uncle and best friend. Everyone starts screaming, but I didn't flinch. It was really weird. I just looked around and one of these guys said, what about him? And looks right at me and just says, F it. And they run back to their cars. I walk to my car and drive to where my uncle and friend were, stop the car and just hear my mom and aunt screaming that my uncle got shot. Cops came and spent the next 2 hours talking to the cops about what had happened, what they looked like, etc. Found out why they approached us later that night. Apparently, while my sister, uncles, and friends were smoking outside, those guys came outside to smoke, and while smoking said some racist stuff to our friends, and they ended up pushing and shoving, and my sister decked one of them. They found the guys later, and we testified against them. They're serving 15-20 years. My uncle was really lucky they shot him in the back and missed all his organs. I found out later that before they left the bar, they were in the bathroom snorting drugs and that they were planning on just walking up to the car and unloading. Story 8. I almost got knifed in the Dominican Republic by these two kids in a tiny town. They saw me walking around at night and came to my hotel with knives. I was out on the balcony in front of my room and they come up to me not saying a word but brandishing large enough knives. So I put my hands up and real cool-like reached into my pocket and handed them $200 of local currency and they ran off. The kicker is, my wife was in an unlocked room right there with maybe $2,500 and all of our stuff. And I made enough noise about it, talking calmly but loudly enough, then I heard the door lock, thank God. My first thought was, okay, they want money. My second was, what if they get in that room with my wife? That second question still screws with me. Anyway, so this town is small, and I walked over to the police station and explained what happened. And the cops are like, oh, yeah, we probably know who it is. Come back tomorrow morning at 9 and we'll have you identify them. Came back at 9 and they had both of them in custody. Never got my money back, but whatever. Story 9. Didn't happen to me, but my dad was getting gas in a particularly sketchy part of town that he wasn't usually in. A man approaches my dad as he's filling his gas tank, points a gun at him and shouts, "Give me your wallet." Instead, my dad pulls the gas nozzle out of his truck and sprays the guy. At the time, my dad smoked and pulled out his Zippo lighter and begins to strike it. The best part is that the robber called the police on my dad for trying to light him on fire. In the end, my dad got away with nothing and the other guy got hauled away in a police car. Story 10. Not me, but my dad. He was about 25 at the time, probably 35 years ago now. He lived in a bad neighborhood, and after getting a pack of cigs from a 7-Eleven, he was sitting in his car for a second, and a young guy came up to his window with a gun. My dad says he said, "Give me all your money or I'll kill you right here, right now." He said, "Look, I have $30 and frankly, that money is mine. You're gonna have to kill me for it. Is it worth the blood of a human and most likely life in prison for $30? He said the guy had this type of, well, whatever attitude about it, gave him a goodbye tap on his car like he just came up to say hello and walked away. He said the guy was really casual about it, like oddly so. He didn't sleep well for a few months after that experience. Story 11. I don't know if he wanted to murder us, but was definitely up to no good. My mom and I were just walking somewhere. I don't remember to where, I was much younger, but it was in the south of France somewhere. There was a guy who came around the corner and got in our way, telling us he has a gun in his pocket, probably BS, and that we needed to give him everything to pass. My mom grew up in Paris and walked through shady parts when she was younger and knows how to react. So she just straight up told him, "No thanks," slapped his shoulder a little to push him out of the way, and went by him. Story 12. I'm a motorcycle rider. Just over a year ago, I purchased my Senna 20S, and at the time, it met all my expectations. Great sound quality for music, clear calls, and contact with my fellow riders. Little did I know that it would one day save my life. On February 28, 2016, around 9:30 p.m., I came home from a ride. I got off my bike in the driveway where I was met by a man with a gun who had broken into my home. He demanded I enter the house, and as I approached the door, threw my cell phone onto the ground. As I crossed the threshold, I was forced to the ground and my hands and feet were bound with phone cord. The intruder then resumed his vicious ransacking of my house while I lay there in my helmet wondering what was going to happen to me when he was done. Sometime later, my roommate pulled up and parked his car in the garage. The intruder ran out the front door to confront him. I heard a scuffle outside for a few minutes, after which my roommate was forced into the house, bloodied, beaten, and then bound in a separate room. The destruction of the house continued once again. He discovered the safe, pistol, and rifle cases, violently demanding the keys and combinations while kicking my roommate. He began speaking irrationally about how he was looking for CP and assault rifles, how someone had sent him to the house months earlier, and he had been watching the house for a couple of days. He was going to hold us up for about 2 days while he cleaned up his fingerprints and burned parts of the house to get rid of DNA. He would then drive us into the middle of nowhere and leave us for dead. While he was spending time in the back room attempting to break into the safe, I was able to break one of my hands free and turn my Senna on. The moment the Senna said phone connected, I had a small glimmer of hope. The noise of the intruder breaking into the safe granted me an opportunity to access the voice command speed dial system on the Senna. Whispering quietly, I didn't necessarily care who it ended up calling, I just prayed for anyone to answer. My father, who is 3 hours ahead on the Eastern time zone, answered, and I repeatedly whispered, 911, 911, 911. He eventually replied back to me, 911? Confirming that he knew there was a problem. I then started repeatedly whispering the address, at which point the intruder came around the corner and yelled at me, "What is that noise?" I told him, "It's just the radio playing in the helmet and I can't turn it off." He proceeded to take a hammer to the side of my helmet while it was still on my head, destroying the Senna. He grabbed the remains and threw them into the toilet. He then started a fire in the fireplace to burn random items from around the house, including his own shoes, which he replaced with the shoes directly off my feet. My father eventually tried calling back, but when my cell phone rang, the intruder smashed it with a hammer and threw it into the fire as well. The police finally arrived and noticed the blood on the ground from the scuffle and called for backup. The intruder became nervous. He unbound me and instructed me to answer the door and send the cops away. I agreed, stood up, and approached the front door. The police were shouting, "Local police department, open the door," over and over again. And my roommate shouted back from the other room, "We are in here," repeatedly. The intruder ran to the other room to silence my roommate. I reached out and opened the door to 5 or 6 officers with weapons drawn. I ran out into the front yard yelling hostage with my hands up, hoping that no one would shoot. As I was about to be restrained, behind me, the intruder slammed the door. The police quickly withdrew back to the street. I was escorted by an officer as fast as possible to the street, barely able to keep my footing as we moved. I was dragged through the front lawn and placed in the back of the squad car. I updated them on the situation inside the house and how to distinguish between my roommate and the intruder. The local SWAT team was called in to secure the house. After another 2 hours or so, my roommate was finally able to escape his bindings and make his way out of the house, beat up, but safe. The intruder ended up escaping out of the back door of the house somewhere in that 2-hour window. The entire ordeal lasted around 6 hours. The suspect had been found in jail from unrelated charges and was linked to the case with evidence found at my house. June 17th, after a year of BSing the court system with an attempt at getting off on mental disorder and state psych hospital saying he is fit to stand trial, he was sentenced to prison, 26 years. Story 13. One time, my mother was driving down to Tanzania with my uncle while she was pregnant with me. It was early in the afternoon, so she was extremely shocked to find a bunch of armed robbers waiting on the side of the road, like a bunch of hyenas waiting for their prey to come to them. They started waving their guns around, telling my uncle and mother to come out of the car. I believed that they had the intention to kill. However, this is where it got interesting. The leader of that gang took one look at my mother's belly, saw that it had a bump, and simply let them go. My mother tells me that when the leader saw that she was pregnant, his eyes filled with remorse. Maybe he was a former father as well. Anyway, they took my uncle's wallet and bade us goodbye. To this day, I keep on telling my uncle that I saved his life. Story 14. Don't know if this counts, but I was alone by a lake one evening a few years ago. Insects were humming around, their wings glistening in the fading sunlight, and fish swam near my feet. It was super chill, and I've rarely felt more peaceful, until someone moved in the bushes. Now, normally I would have ignored this. People came and went from the spot fairly frequently. It was a popular makeout spot, but something felt off about this time. The person was taking too long, like they were trying to be quiet. I thought maybe it was a couple messing around, so I got to my feet and started to leave. As I turned to the exit, a man stepped from the bushes. He had a metal rod in one hand and a cord in the other. My first thought was he was just collecting trash, but a second later, before I could even register why, I was suddenly, viscerally angry. I wanted to hurt this man more than I've ever wanted to hurt anyone before. I think he must have saw the crazy in my eyes or something though, cause he hesitated and forced this weird smile. I was unarmed, but I slowly reached around my back like I was putting my hand on a gun, and he moved back into the bushes. A few moments later, he reemerged empty-handed and asked how the fish were today. I said, "Good," flashed a smile, and left. Story 15. My best friend growing up had an uncle with a bad temper. That, along with severe little man syndrome. Anyway, I was leaving her house one night after we'd hung out and studied together for school. While I walked around the cul-de-sac she lived on, I was grabbed from behind and whoever it was trying to put me in a headlock. I could tell they were much shorter than me. I was nearing 5'10" by the time I was 14, and naturally this person couldn't have been more than 5'5" at the max. So I put my chin down to stop them and flip him over my shoulder using everything that I had. I looked and lo and behold, it's the uncle. I asked him, "What the F, man?" And he said, "Don't fight me and it won't hurt so bad." I was terrified, but I knew this guy, so I said, "Come on, what's this about? Why are you doing this?" He did nothing but growl, and the look in his eyes said that he wasn't backing down. He'd recovered pretty quickly from my flip, but I swung my book-filled backpack when he charged me at his face, and he just hit the ground after that. I ran back to my friend's house and told her dad everything. He went back out and beat the crap out of his brother. I wasn't allowed to go back to her house ever again after that. Story 16. I don't know if this guy was going to murder us, but it was super sketchy. My mom and I were walking back from a baseball game one summer after I got back from college. My mom had had a few, so I was driving. On the way back, some sketchy dudes started following us. I took a turn towards our car in a parking lot and he started muttering things. I told him to go away, but he ignored me. I gave my mom my shirt I got at the game and told her to run to the car. The dude then lunged at me after she took off, so I body slammed him and he landed on his butt, and I ran to the car, locked it, and we flew out of there. That was a scary yet exhilarating moment, and we just drove home after that. I live near a pretty bad city, so things like this are expected, so we saw no point in calling the police or stadium security, but it was frightening nonetheless. Story 17. I had just gotten off my apartment security job at a ghetto complex. As I walked to my car, a drug dealer was standing in front of it. He saw me and pulled a firearm out of his waistband and put it to my head. I looked at him and looked at the people around him. We were 10 feet from a pool full of parents and kids, and everyone was watching. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Do it if you want. I'm just a guard and I'm off duty. I don't give a crap what you're doing here. This is just overtime for me. But look around. There's at least 20 witnesses. Someone will talk." I opened my car door and got in. He just put his gun back in his waistband, got on his bike, and left. I drove as fast as I could home and had to change my boxers. Story 18. Not me, but my dad. So once, right outside my auntie's house, my dad got out of his car. It was a cool car, and the neighborhood knew my dad because he's very outgoing. And then this kid runs up to him and points a gun up to his head and tells my dad to give him the keys. My dad snatched the gun from him and all the neighbors were looking out at the scene, and he hears, "Thomas, don't hurt my cousin, bro. He's challenged." The kid dropped to the floor crying and my dad's friend was super apologetic. He took back the gun since it was his and not the kid's. That kid also became my babysitter from when I was little, which is weird, but that's how the hood works, I guess. Story 19. I grew up in a bad neighborhood and had to talk my way out of corners all the time. I also later studied sociology and criminology and kind of put the pieces together. See, I grew up in one of those post-Soviet cities with huge gray concrete blocks. It was pretty common that drunken teenage evenings would end up in someone getting beaten, stabbed, or something like that. Guns were rare, but people would get badly cut by broken bottles all the time. I was a weak, skinny, pale dude. You'd think the first one to be beaten up. Actually, nah, I never got so much as seriously punched in the face. One of the very, very few guys I know to have this privilege. There's always some luck too, but there is a method, and my method was always the same. Quickly define the situation according to my rules. My first girlfriend didn't like to go downtown with me at first, because as soon as we've met, for instance, an aggressive group of drunken teens waving broken bottles, that I knew we'd have to deal with anyway, I would calmly come to them and ask them for a cigarette or change. I would pick the one person that looked the most sober and calm and just start talking to them. Now, I've used this trick tons of times. Once I was standing at an ATM withdrawing money, and two huge guys appeared out of nowhere, approaching me quickly. Before they managed to say anything, I blurted out, "You from around here? You do look like you know your way around. See, I'm looking for this bar here." They were clearly put off balance, but one of them mumbled something along the lines of, "Yeah, they were from around there." They ended up showing me the way to a bar I didn't even want to come to anyway. Another time, two guys were clearly high on whatever and were impromptu rapping at the same time terrorizing a good half of a bus with a huge pair of pincers. Yeah, that's a fun tool. I wasn't just able to get them to leave me alone, but I sat with them, joking around, slowly getting down and basically stopping them from cutting into a guy's ear. We split ways as best buds. Now, the key word to understand is situation. In sociology, there's this amazing book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life by E. Goffman. The guy argues that in all social situations, we basically jump into a role and just play the role. So I'm the guy who rides the train, the guy who buys the ticket, the guy who hits on a woman, the teacher, the husband, or whatever. The behaviors and roles are mostly written. We just replay them. Now, the victim who was hit by 3 drunken guys at a bus station is also a role. And if you are very quick, you can stop the encounter from becoming this situation and invite the guys into a completely different one. It may well become 4 drunken guys talking about sports, smoking cigarettes at a bus station. No BS, I've done it a number of times and still am doing it regularly when I see it coming. You wouldn't believe how malleable people are when it comes to defining situations. Granted, that won't work on someone who is a professional on a job. You won't steer a professional pickpocket into becoming your drunken best pal. These are rare, however. Most thieves are not professionals, and the safest thing to do is to just give them what they want. The thing is that very few roles actually involve as hard, non-negotiable condition punching someone in the face or stabbing them. Thieves never want that. They want the cash. Aggressive drunks may want that, but it's never about you. They're just looking for someone who will play with them in the mini-play called The Victim Who Was Hit by 3 Drunken Guys at a Bus Station. They will force you into the scenario, sure, but if you act quickly and with a cool head, you can change it into a different one. The second trick, the one that works with groups, is to become part of the group. That's why you need to select the one person that's not drunk and not that aggressive, or simply looks talkable. If they do as much as answer your question that they don't have a cigarette, you're probably good. Then you mumble and ask if there's a place nearby where you can buy a pack. If he starts thinking and looking around, you're good. At this point, his drunken pals are looking at you, but now you're part of the group, you see. You still have to be on your guard, but you're good for now. 95% of success is staying calm, because you being frightened is only part of those scenarios that you don't want to go into. The perfect stance is calm innocence, like asking them for a cigarette is the normalest thing to do. The thing to avoid is bravado too, because that wakes up their inner male and stirs their testosterone. Never talk to the ladies in the company first too. Might seem like a reasonable scenario to get into their group, but it isn't. Instead, you're now hitting on their ladies. I know it sounds dopey, but it really did save me from a number of life-threatening and certainly dangerous situations.